The LCS is finally moving its start time to something more appropriate for the US and East Coast. Travis Gafford has two different interviews with both Nas and John Needham from Riot Games on the LoL Esports side, and then one with the creative director of the LCS. They're about an hour in total. I'm not able to react to these on live stream simply because I got a lot of stuff going on today. I'm going to try and react to these over the course of the next 2 hours and then chop it up, edit it, and you'll all be watching it as is. So let's begin.
I am at Riot Games today to talk to John Needham, president of Esports.
Hi, everyone.
And Naz Alitaha, who is the head of Global LoL Esports at Riot.
Hello.
And we should say that this is the second time I have done this interview. I was here 2 days ago on stage at the studio where we talked about everything. And then yesterday I got a call saying that almost everything in the interview was now irrelevant and outdated because there's a big change that you have made. So here to talk a little bit about the update.
Release the director's cut.
What has changed, Naz?
Yes. Well, after the feedback that we've received from the North American community about the new start times for the LCS, we are going to make a change. We're really grateful for the feedback, and as a result of it, the broadcasts on Thursdays and Fridays are now going to start at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. And that's a change, for those that don't know, from 12 p.m. Pacific and 3 p.m. Eastern. So I know that a lot of people were pushing, including even myself, for about a 2 or 3 hour change time. What was the sort of methodology by which you arrived at 2 o'clock? Was it just, hey, this is what people want? Or is it, a decision where you looked at it?
I'm guessing, and I want to do a lot of predictions as to what they're thinking because it really goes into understanding the mental psyche. Their response is likely going to be, we were under the assumption, well, they won't say this, but we were under the assumption that no matter what time we started, we would get 50,000 people. But the backlash made it 50,000 people from the US, and then we were trying to increase the EU audience. By changing it to this time, we are saying that we think that the North American audience was going to drop below 50, and we cannot afford that.
And you're like, okay, this still kind of syncs well with maybe getting a more global audience as well. So what went into 2 o'clock?
Yeah, well, we took the feedback, we came back to our teams, we really kind of looked through the data to try to find a time that first and foremost is optimized for a North American audience. So we feel like 2 p.m., which is 5 p.m. on the East Coast, fits hopefully the lifestyles and the needs of our North American fans. 5 p.m. Eastern, when we have a 5-hour or so broadcast, it means that we end around 10 or 10:30. We didn't want to go too much later than that because we think that wouldn't be ideal for fans on the East Coast or even Central Time Zone. So that's.
I mean, sure, but the initial thought, the initial alignment wasn't about North American fans.
We nailed down that 2 p.m., 5 p.m. Eastern. And, the original noon start time was intended to really kind of maximize the available audience for the LCS of the English-speaking community. But again, as we saw, how fans were feeling about it, we wanted to make sure that we were accommodating North American fans first and foremost.
Yeah. I think, obviously, East Coast fans probably pretty happy with this. West Coast fans still going to be feeling a little frustrated with the 2 p.m. Any thoughts on that? How this will affect them?
Yeah, it's tough in the U.S. I think a lot of our other regions don't have this time zone to really consider when they're setting their start time. So, we're hopeful that through match scheduling, we'll make sure that fans on the West Coast are also able to access the best of the league, when they want on a daily basis. So it'll be an iterative process, as we go through the season, as we kind of understand the viewing patterns and behaviors and needs on these new days and these new times, we'll be making sure that the team's adjusting as we go.
I give it 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and they redo the schedule so that the best games are last and hit right at that 9 p.m. prime time slot.
Yeah, and we have about 70% of our North American audience that's on the East Coast. So
there you
as
go.
we looked
They
at all
just
the
gave the
time
number,
zones,
70%.
Looking at the
Literally
Midwest,
the majority
and
of your
East
audience
Coast
is on the
was
East
one
Coast.
that we would lean more to when we're.
So why the fuck was the start time?
You mentioned the matches that will be played. When people were looking at the schedule that got released, it looks like it's still it looked like at the time that it was front loaded with the sort of matches
This
of the
is
day,
what I
the
meant
big
by the
matches in the beginning. Are you still planning on having it programmed that way? Is this something that'll shift over time? How are you approaching?
It's something that is going to be malleable over time. We're not going to
3
change
weeks.
that, those first few weeks, that schedule, because we've already communicated that to the pro teams, and it'd be pretty unfair for them who, they've been prepping and scrimming against that match schedule. So we want to.
That's okay. That's just not correct. That's a PR answer, because you could shift, you can keep the game schedule exactly the same with the opponents that they're facing at the same exact time. There is no problem with you shifting to earlier in the day and rearranging that schedule. No, like that.
Want to make sure that we keep that consistent, but after we see, like I said, what viewership is like and how
You can
fans are
move
feeling after the
the
first
5
couple
p.m.
weeks,
game to
we'll
9
make
p.m. like
changes to the
that
latter
if you
weeks
want to,
needed.
and that affects nobody.
So I do want to get a little bit broader and talk about the way in which we got here, which was led, I think, a lot by communications that people were very frustrated
I
by.
should probably have my
John, you and I talked at Worlds, and I asked you, when are you planning on talking about this stuff? It had already been reported in outlets that the days were getting shifted. The time stuff had not come out yet. And you had mentioned that there were specific windows.
Yes.
That ended up coming out about 2 days before Riot's holiday break. Like, I feel like maybe 3 months after I'd started to hear this stuff, 2 months after it had started to get out. Why wait so long to get this pretty important information out?
Yeah, so as we talked at Worlds, we like to give Worlds a big window where people can just enjoy and focus on Worlds. And after Worlds, we want people to bask in the glory of Worlds for a few weeks before we make any big announcements. I have seen commentary on Reddit around, we deliberately did this like right before our break. That wasn't the case at all. Really, our plan was that we did want to announce this in the off-season one. We wanted to do it a significant time after Worlds. There's not a lot of time between the end of Worlds and our holiday break. But where we're really focused was this blog that we put out right after the announcement. And I think this is kind of where we fell down. We were putting all of our, I guess, hopes in the blog, kind of answering a lot of the questions.
What? That was never going to be the case. One blog changing everything about LoL Esports and when it starts in various different regions was never going to be enough. And I guarantee somebody said that. There's no way. Like, these everybody that works at Riot individually is smart. There's no way.
And giving our fans insight into how we made that decision. And the reality is the blog just didn't land. We didn't do a good job with the blog, and I'm sorry about that.
You also didn't give yourself any time to follow up immediately
and we
afterwards. You all went on break, which is
So
understandable.
It was
but then
nothing
you should
about us
release the
going away
blog
on
post
break.
earlier.
If anything, you don't want to make announcements like this when you go off on break because you want people to go and relax and know that everything's okay. But yeah, we didn't do a good job on the blog. It's that simple.
I mean, and that's that last part that you talk about is getting this out right before the break. I mean, I think a lot of people were disappointed because these types of announcements, you usually want to be able to have like a dialogue with the community. Yeah. Having it hit 2 days before the break, it was really aggravating some people. Where it felt like even if it was not your intention to put it out there and then immediately head into the holidays, a lot of people felt like there was not any opportunity for dialogue with Riot or like feedback or AMAs or additional videos or additional interviews or anything like that. How did it end up so last minute?
Yeah,
I think, look, we iterate a lot on this blog, and that just took longer, and coming out of Worlds, the entire team is exhausted, so we all kind of need to take a break a little bit.
Okay, I am not disagreeing with that in any capacity, because I saw how hard everybody worked during Worlds. The process to put on an event like that at that scale, by all means, very long, very tedious, very strenuous. But you have to have somebody. You have to hire more people then. You need to have more people in positions just back at Riot HQ that can handle this.
After Worlds, and it just didn't leave us a lot of time to get it pulled together. So
there's a bit of a prevailing narrative that has occurred recently around, this idea that Riot doesn't care as much about the LCS these days. And I think that's what a lot of people also felt from that, right? Is that because it was such limited communication, because it felt so last minute at the end of the year, that this was a sign that this was just not a very high priority for the team. And I'm curious if you have anything to say to address those concerns or those feelings from people.
Please.
Yeah, 100%. So, I think company-wide at Riot, we probably haven't done the best job recently in communicating what's happening with our games and the company and everything, and we are focused on that. We built a new community team this last year. We have a new social person running social for esports specifically that we just hired, just started right after the break. So you're going to see more focus and on us communicating better with the community. I tell you, if there's one thing I really want to talk a lot about, and we talked about this after Worlds, was this whole narrative around we don't care about the LCS. The LCS is dying. Riot has forgotten about the LCS. That just couldn't be further from the truth. League of Legends esport is by far the biggest esport on the planet, one of the biggest sports on the planet. The LCS is one of our more important leagues within that ecosystem. Yes. We're not going to do anything that weakens our hold, that hurts the overall sport, that hurts the LCS. It's our oldest league. Riot has invested over the years over $250 million into the LCS.
It doesn't matter how much you've invested. It matters about your actions going forward.
We wouldn't just walk away from that investment at all. If anything, we want to get more out of that. And the LCS as a league is our number 2 league in our ecosystem from a revenue perspective. The unfortunate part is that it's number 4 and sometimes on some weekends number 5 in terms of viewership. So as a leader,
I knew it was going to be above Europe. I guess China has to be number 1, or well, no, I guess the LCK is now number 2. Huh.
I look at that gap and I go, we have some work to do to make the LCS better. So we're going to focus on the LCS this year. We are investing in the LCS 50% more this year than we did back in 2018. So we continue to make more investments.
Okay, but we don't know. 50% more than 2018, but what was the investment in 2018 relative to 2019, 2020, and 2021? We need to be able to see year over year to make that comparison valuable whatsoever as like a basis of compare. That it sounds nice, but you're giving us nothing to base it on.
Because I have a philosophy around I'm going to invest into our products to make them better, to make them sustainable.
Good.
And so we're going to do that. And that's why you see so many changes to the LCS right now with broadcast times, with what we want to do with the show. We've got other things that we can't talk about right now that we're investing in, but we love the LCS. If there's one thing I don't want our fans to doubt, we are so committed to the LCS. We are so passionate about the league. It hurts us when we see our fans not believing that, because that is not the intent.
I'm sure Travis will get into this, but you have to.
I know you mentioned investing more than you did in 2018.
You have to talk about the stuff publicly.
A conversation that has occurred, and we'll talk about this later.
You
but
can't
the
just say you're investing in it
behind
the scenes, and then we never see the fruits of that later.
Budget cuts on the LCS this year, Naz. Are there budget cuts? What does the budget look like for this year?
There are no budget cuts. John can vouch for it because John gives me my budget for LoL Esports. Our budget year over year is flat. So we are going to be investing just as much as we did last year, and probably 2020 in 2023. We're going to have 2 amazing road shows. We've revamped the studio and really invested in bringing that kind of modernizing, I'd say, the studio and getting really great technology in there. We're investing in publishing and promotion and content creation. And so the investment is as high as it's ever been for the LCS. And frankly, we're not going to take our foot off that pedal, even going into future years.
Yeah. Okay, so
I really wish Travis would have pressed that point a little bit more. So, because that's interesting. So the LCS has the second highest revenue stream of any of the major or any of the leagues, period. They're keeping costs the same. So from Riot's side, realistically, we already knew that the LCS was borderline profitable going into this year. Obviously, that might change a little bit with the day change and potential sponsorships, because currently there's no revenue stream beyond that. They must have, if they're keeping their budget the same, they have faith that they can grow their revenues, at least within the next year or two, to become profitable. Which then just means that the teams have more of an issue than the league, I guess. Let me just really quick.
Other concern that people had around the budget cut stuff, the rumors, were just, there was a report that talked about how much FTX going away across many different sectors, but including their partnership with Riot, how much money that was and how much that affected the LCS. Are there any repercussions from a sponsor like that?
The answer has to be yes.
We're just as invested, regardless of what is happening with FTX. We're not taking down our investment as a result of that.
That was a dodge.
We have a fantastic business development team, and they're going to be out there, bringing sponsors in. And, LCS this year, they're going to have 10 or more sponsors. So the league is healthy in that regard, even though
Holy
FTX
shit,
won't be on
what?
board anymore.
Yeah, and when
10 or more sponsors. That's more than there was last year.
I say the LCS is the number 2 revenue generating league, that's adjusting for FPX as well.
Okay, gotcha.
Holy
and then
shit!
Whenever you
what?
talked a little bit about the
How much money is Riot? Well, they're okay, not fully profitable, obviously, but Jesus Christ!
the number 2, you also mentioned viewership and LCS being 4th or 5th.
Their
Has it
sales
always
team
been
deserves
that
a
way?
damn
Obviously
raise.
fans have felt as though there's been a viewership dip
It
recently.
hasn't. Actually, sadly, viewership has been slipping over the past 3 years. So the LCS used to be, and I'm saying 5-6 years ago, the number 3 league in our ecosystem from a
We're now
viewership
solidly
perspective.
fighting for
The
fourth.
LEC has done a great job building their show over the past few years. And, Brazil, our fans in Brazil and CB LoL just continues to get more and more popular. So as
And when people tell me,
the
oh, you
LCS
need international
LCS
success to
viewership
grow,
has
look at
slipped a
fucking
bit over the
Brazil and
past few
CB
years.
LoL.
We've
They
just
do
had
it
leagues
so
that
well.
are growing and making strides.
They don't even have the money.
Going back to the communication front, I feel as though not just on the conversation at the end of the year, but also just in various ways, fans get frustrated when they feel like there's a lack of they feel like there's a persistent lack of communication on the LCS side. So a great example of that is there was no communication really about the kickoff tournament, the global kickoff tournament, and what LCS was doing. It was a reference in that article that came out at the end of last year, but also it was about 24 hours beforehand that we saw any kind of promotion of the event from the LCS side. I think one tweet went out
Kind of a
for
problem.
that kickoff tournament that happened last week. So that's an issue. The blog post at the end of last year did not reference at all that lock-in disappeared. So fans, even though that was a popular event, and I know there were issues with visas and all that stuff, that was also a thing where people were just like, "Hey, we knew about this product, and now it's just gone." What is causing sort of the shortfalls there?
Yeah, it's just something we've got to get better at, and I think we're inconsistent across the world. Some of our regional leagues do this
That was a very PR answer.
fantastically. And we're going to work on this for the LCS. We're all leaning in to make sure that we can provide more transparency with the fans. We hate that the silence from our end essentially, created angst and skepticism in the community. And not only that, because the
Good
silence
follow-up.
went for too long, I would say, that festered, right? And now, understandably, we see some of the concern and the narratives that, as we're saying, are false, but I don't blame the community that those are the narratives. That's on us. And so
Just have to
you're
talk to us
going to
more.
start hearing a whole lot more. That is something that we are going to be pushing on as a big goal of ours. Be patient with us. It might take a little bit of time, just to get those wheels in motion. But it's absolutely.
I love the message, but the time to ask for patience is gone. Like, now is the point where you just have to have action. And if you're still short-staffed on the LCS side, say so. Like, that is clearly the biggest issue that is affecting all of Riot. Between the LCS, the dev side, everything. Just say you're short-staffed. Don't tell us to be patient with you. Tell us why this is a problem and what you're doing to fix it. Not vague answers. Saying that you will communicate is fine. How are you going to communicate? Are you going to give us blog posts once a month? Are you going to give us videos every 3 weeks? Give us something. Don't just say you're going to communicate. Give us metrics that we can hold you accountable to, because by all means, I have faith that things can turn around, that you are going to communicate, but not everybody is going to believe that. Not everybody is the optimist Andy that I am, that can take people at their word and believe it, even if I've been dragged in the dirt a few times prior to that. You have to give tangible things. Just come out and say that you're going to, like, once a month, you're going to talk to us. Like, in a formal post. And then obviously smaller
A
teams.
priority. We want to make sure that fans have information. We want to make sure we're having that dialogue.
Yeah, we talked about the basics of sports marketing last time we got together, and that is our thematic. I've had numerous people tell me, John, you've done a really good job building a brand around this basics of sports marketing. I'm going to pound the living daylight out of that all year. So, like I said, we just hired a new head of social, she's helping us strategize around our channels and getting better with that. We have new community people we're reorganizing around as a company, not just for esports, but as Riot, around getting better about talking to our community.
And I just want to say, there are so many passionate rioters that are working for the LCS.
Yes.
Everything is so well intended. They believe in the product. They are working so hard. And so I don't want this to seem like, we're coming down hard on a specific team. This was kind of an unintended outcome. And so it's something that we're going to work on. It's something that I know the team is excited also to lean into and, start talking to the community more often.
And Travis, I'm happy to do this show every month, if that helps.
I mean, I hope in one sense we don't have to do it every month, or if we do, it's around more positive stuff. Because there's just obviously a lot of frustration. It's not always fun to come in and be to have my laundry list of issues, of which I will bring up the next one. People are,
of note so far, we're almost halfway there. Travis hasn't pushed back a lot, but then again, we're still at like the information stage. I'm expecting Travis to give at least a little bit more pushback by the time this series gets done.
I've seen a lot of chatter on Twitter, obviously very different than at Worlds where you have a global sport people have to travel to attend, but we're less than 2 weeks out from the start of LCS tickets, which are, it's a familiar refrain, not available right now, and no information on when those are going on sale. So I don't know if there's any way you can share anything around that.
You're going to hear it here first. Tickets for the LCS will go on sale on Wednesday of this week.
Okay.
Finally.
It's still only a week ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
So
It's a week.
Obviously, I guess that's also one of those things that you guys are working, hopefully, to implement.
100%, and that's across the board. Not just for LCS, for global events. That is.
We should have tickets for finals in summer already out right now. Like, by this point next year, I want to be able to buy, like, going into the year, I want to be able to buy tickets for the end of the year. And, like, make all my plans, like, adjust everything, like, plan vacations, trips, etc. Like, that should be the goal. If we are not at that point, I'm sorry, but I think we failed.
Is a pain point for our fans. It's a pain point we are absolutely going to address. We want to provide the best esports experience, whether you're watching at home, whether you're coming to one of our arenas, whether you're traveling, to an international event. And part of that experience is that. It's the planning and the travel and being able to actually have the runway you need to be able to do that effectively. So it's something that we're working on with all of our teams across the board. And I think you'll be seeing some other announcements coming out this week for the LCS, in terms of their roadshows and what you can expect there too.
Yes.
The thing you mentioned a
Yes.
second ago about sports marketing was, as you said, something that we talked about in that last interview a couple months ago. I think a great example of where it seems as though that's somewhat lacking is around the updates to the schedule and the days. Not only just on the announcement coming very late, but I
gotta go start folding. I'll be back. And we're back.
don't watch cable television. I don't have it. But
Does anybody really?
Yeah, exactly. But I
mean,
know that
we own the
whenever in
apps,
traditional
which are
sports there's a
basically the
schedule
same
change
thing.
or they change programming or broadcast times or whatever, there's a very big initiative to push for people to become aware of that. I would have expected by now to start seeing videos of, the casters all being like, oh, you could watch it during the weekdays coming home from work, like a big push to try to educate people on this new time. I know that the people that are probably watching this video and are on Reddit and the most passionate fans are
I feel called out.
very much aware of the times and the date change because they've been talking about it so much. But I think that the average LCS fan probably doesn't even know that Doublelift is coming back to the league yet. So I think that's one of my questions is, why has there not been yet a bigger push to educate people, make people aware that this thing is happening? Because I imagine a lot of folks will just
Because
stumble
they
across
weren't
it
solid
maybe even in
on
week
it?
2 or week 3 where they're like, oh, why is LCS on a Thursday?
I mean, you'll see us in the client. That's our primary channel where we reach out to our players and we let them know what's happening. We control that by region as well, so we can do LCS specific stuff.
I mean,
in
that's
the
a big deal.
client.
I don't want to diminish
As
that,
you can
but, like,
imagine,
that-
there's
I felt
always
like
a
that was
lot
given.
happening in League as a game. That client space is difficult to get, and typically you get small windows there. So you will see some promotion in the client before. Again, we just haven't done a great job on the communication side. We'll get better leaning into this stuff.
Is there a
Earlier.
Is there a plan to go beyond the client? Because obviously you're limited then to.
Okay,
there's a lot of
good
people that
follow-up.
watch the game and maybe haven't been
Thank you.
playing the start of the season stuff yet, right?
Yeah. It's super interesting. We have done tests around doing external media buys for our leagues. They don't really move the needle for us. And the reason why I think is, esports is a little
Really?
bit different than traditional sports. You kind of need to
Agreed.
know, specifically for League, I think, even compared to Valorant, you need to know the game to really appreciate the sport. So the people that we try to activate first and foremost are active players in the game. So
I get that, but you should also have an all-out, all frontal push on social media as well. Like, I don't know. I think that there's a lot. They might not see the value in it, but I think like reaching out to content creators, to literally anybody else to promote the start of the split, we'd be happy to work with Riot to do so and like put out as much stuff as humanly possible. Because our audiences that might not, for example, I got 40,000 on TikTok. Not all of them are going to see the video that I put out on it, because if I average 2,000 to 3,000 views on a video, if one pops off like 10 or 11K, then a portion of my audience sees it, but not all of them know when the start date is, and that's even for like a diehard following. So like imagine if you just got like 10, 15 content creators and just like partner with them and just said, hey, we're like come up with a video for the start of the LCS, like made by many, and just something. It needs to be more than just the client. I get the client is going to be 95% of it, but like that extra 4% is such a nice personal touch.
we just found the most effective channel for us to invest in is in the client, because that's where our players, that's where our fans are, hopefully every day.
Yeah, and you can expect to see some of those marketing, assets going out over these next 2 weeks in that lead up to, opening day. I know the team has kind of a full-fledged publishing plan, so whether that's in the client, on our social channels, on other regions broadcasts to make, overall audiences aware of not just the LCS, but here's everything, you can catch, across the LoL esports ecosystem coming up here in the next couple weeks.
One of the major things that I
mean,
think
it is what it
further ignited the frustrations of folks around the communication stuff was the Dash announcement at the beginning of the year. People were, I think, really surprised. Obviously, people are huge fans of his work on the broadcast.
We are too.
And, well, I mean, and that's, I think, what makes people really frustrated, right, is that it felt as though there was not any recognition from LCS. I think there was only a retweet of what he had posted, and there was a lot of questions around what this even meant. I know he referenced that he might continue to work with the LCS in some capacity. I interviewed Justin. Well, I interviewed Justin. He mentioned some of that as well, the creative director for the LCS. But why was there such a sort of silence around his departure, and why did that news come out that way?
So I guess, first and foremost, we love Dash. Dash has been amazing. We've had a long relationship with him. His performance is always stellar. So the changes we're making to the show have nothing to do with Dash's performance or our relationship with Dash. We love Dash. We started talking to him last August because we did some tests this last year around a hostless show and what that could look like for the LCS. And one of the things that we think we can improve with the LCS show is traditionally it was set up kind of like ESPN and kind of like traditional sports where you see the match, you go to Analyst Desk, you analyze the match. We don't necessarily think that's what our fans want in esports. So we want to change the format of the show. And we started talking to Dash about this last August, that we think we're going to make a stronger push into doing a hostless show, doing more entertaining segments instead of Analyst Desk, and just experiment more to see if we can find a voice that resonates better with our North American fans. So Dash, we always wanted him to be a part of that. We have other esports, we have international events where we're in active conversations with Dash to work with us on those. So for us, it wasn't a goodbye to Dash, because we're not saying goodbye to Dash. We wanted to do a joint release with him, but Dash had to go a little bit earlier, and that's fine. But we're not quite there on how we're going to fully utilize Dash, but he will be a part of the LCS show this year. So we just didn't feel it was right to say goodbye, because we don't ever want to say goodbye to Dash.
Then you still need to release a statement saying that he will be continuing to be with the LCS. You can't just be silent there. Just the communication on that is not good. And I find it hard to believe that those entertaining segments, that Dash couldn't play a role there. Even if he's not the host as much, which I know is the role that he's naturally filled, but that's because you paid him to be the host. Pay him to be just the same as everybody else. Like, that dynamic can change.
He's been great.
And that's, Travis, I think to your point, and to the earlier point, we just have to get better where, I think the silence on our end is usually very well intended.
Yes, but it's deafening.
Staying silent, again, is causing a lot of misconception, and we've just got to get back to more communication and more transparency.
Yes. The start times and the schedule moving to Thursdays and Fridays, I know we talked a little bit about the update at the beginning, but I'd like to go back to that now. There are a lot of people who saw that announcement, and we talked about this a little bit at the Worlds stuff, but it's kind of perpetuated still, this idea that Valorant's coming in on the weekends, and now LCS, which, again, whenever there's a lack of communication, when there is a lot of talent departure, it perpetuates this idea of this is not as fancy and as exciting as Valorant. How are you balancing the needs of Valorant and the needs of LCS, especially when, for instance, LCS is now on Thursdays and Fridays? If that plan does not go well, if viewership does not look good for the weekdays, the ships have been kind of burned behind us as we've moved to those days because Valorant's going to have it on the weekends.
The first half of this question I wasn't sold on,
so,
but this part
is there any backup plan? What happens if this doesn't work out well?
Do you want to talk?
You want to take the Valorant question?
Yeah. Well, look.
I don't want to hear about Valorant.
When we wanted to get more professional about how we were programming our sports, when we went to a multi-esport structure for Riot with Valorant. What we saw over the past few years is there's significant crossover in the Valorant audience and the League audience, and a lot of times we were cannibalizing ourselves by not programming Valorant, correctly, by it overlapping League of Legends. Also, within League of Legends, there's a lot of shared audience between the LCS and LEC. So having 8 hours.
Hold up. Wait, did I hear that wrong?
Also, a Valorant audience feature for Riot with Valorant. What we saw over the past few years is there's significant crossover in the Valorant audience and the League audience. And
Pause. What? No. Through surveys, we discovered that 9% of NA LoL Esports fans report that they follow the Valorant VCT of Americas. You just completely contradicted the post that you said was going to be the end-all be-all. Like, the reason that people were going to make sense of it. And now you just making sure I heard this right.
What we saw over the past few years is there's significant crossover in the Valorant audience and the League audience, and a lot of times we were cannibalizing ourselves by not programming Valorant, correctly.
You said that
by
wasn't
it
a factor.
overlapping League of Legends. Also, within League of Legends, there's a lot of shared audience between the LCS and LEC. So having 8 hours or more of esports on Saturday between the LCS and LEC just isn't a great fan experience, and it forces a choice on our fans which league they're going to watch. So one, we wanted to give each regional league kind of its own time, its own slot, its own day compared to other regional leagues. But two, we didn't want to cannibalize ourselves across multiple esports. So when you start looking at the schedule, and we did this at the global level, in working in close partnership with the regions, we just wanted to give each sport, we wanted to give each league its own window so that we didn't have to force those kind of choices on our fans. And that's where we landed on LCS being during the week, the Americas VCT League being on the weekend, and in Europe, it's the reverse. So we just had to make choices. When you're trying to carve out windows, you have to make choices. And when we did the analysis of all the viewership data and all the kind of highest available audience for each sport, we landed on Thursday and Fridays for LCS.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, as we looked at the LCS and how we can kind of bolster it, right? Especially after we talked about some of the viewership slippage these last couple of years, getting the LCS its own days and kind of getting them out from under the shadow, I'd say, a little bit of the LEC, because the LEC goes first, right, on the weekends, was really important too.
I agree with this portion of it. I 100% am a fan of reducing the amount of league esports content that I want to consume on weekends, because I tend to watch both Europe and North America, to 5 hours a day would be great. But I can't get over the fact that we just contradicted ourselves on Valorant. That's a massive point. For months, we were told not to, it had nothing to do with it. It was no part of it, etc. But now all of us, just this one thing, I don't know if it was a slip of the tongue or if it was an admittance of truth or what it was.
To us, we want LCS to have ownable days. That is theirs. They will be, the prominent LoL esports broadcast on those days, and we really want to lean into that. So I'm personally excited about Thursday, Fridays, especially now that we're changing the time. We're really hopeful that the NA audience is going to be able to show up and really get to watch, I would say, one of the best esports products in the world. And just to add a couple stats, you mentioned the overlap between the LCS and the LEC. It is a real overlap, right? So 50% or more, I'd say, of LCS fans also watch some LEC. About 35 to 45% of LEC fans also watch the LCS. So having both of those shows, as John said, on the
Which makes
same
sense,
days
because
means
North
that
America
that
can
whole
tune in during the
audience
work
is
hours,
either,
or like
having to choose
early
one
afternoon
or just choose kind of
to
one
watch
matchup
that
in
and
each,
then watch LCS in the
or if
evening.
they really want to tune in for it, trying to watch 10 hours of content every weekend just isn't really realistic, I think, for
I agree.
the
I
lifestyles
I
of our fans.
100%
So
agree.
separating those out, making sure they each have their own days, own spotlights for their audiences was really important.
LCS fans looking at the schedule, they might, if they are already thinking that
come on,
Riot is
Travis, you gotta press that
deprioritizing
question.
LCS, they will look at this and say, well, of course they are, because LCS could have had Saturday and Sunday, and LEC could have had Thursday, Friday, or VCT could have taken the studio on Thursday and Friday, and LCS
Fine
could
with
have been
this
in
follow-up,
there.
though.
So looking at this, they see LCS being on Thursday, Friday, and say, well, of course we got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, so I'd say a couple things. By no means is the LCS at the bottom of the totem pole for us. Like John said, LCS is one of our biggest leagues, our most important leagues. EU VCT is also moving off the weekends. This was an optimization, I'd say, exercise, right, across the whole calendar. And most of our leagues compromised, right? Everyone kind of had to compromise so that we could get every league in a good position.
fair.
So LEC,
That's a
as
fair
an
point.
example, last season was on Fridays and Saturdays, and then if they had a super week, they go into Sundays. They are now going to be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, right? So that's an adjustment for the LEC. We talked about VCT coming off.
That's fair.
LCK is adjusting some of their broadcast times to kind of capture a wider audience. And so this was no way intended for the LCS to have a lesser time slot. And in fact, when we looked at the numbers and the data and the viewing patterns, we actually saw that the audience that's available for the LCS on the weekends versus Thursday, Friday is actually pretty equivalent. It's actually a little bit higher on Thursdays and Fridays. And so, we're going to see. We're going to see how this works. We're committed to really monitoring this season and adjusting. This is going to be new for all of us. So we're going to learn. And we're going to adjust as we go.
I think that's
if we
fair.
need to.
Like,
And
NA fans
our
do
Asian
need to
leagues,
accept
they've
that
been broadcasting during the week for many
we
years.
do come
at this
second
point.
fiddle
It's
to
a
the
great
LEC.
success, by
And
the
that's
way.
not a slight against the LCS.
They don't see a
That's
big
just an
drop-off on
honest
weekends
reflection of where
versus
we're currently
weekdays.
at.
So,
Could we
again,
probably
to
grow
what
more
Nas
weekends?
said, we see a lot of opportunity during the week that we haven't tapped into, and a lot of opportunity in giving each league, each sport, its own window.
So when the announcement first came out at the end of last year, there was kind of an argument made of, hey, we think this can really increase viewership if we put it at 12 o'clock rather than 2. Obviously, I have been a public proponent of putting this at 2, but I do wonder, now that you've shifted it, are you making the conscious decision to have a viewership hit or less viewership available to assist the North American viewers?
Yeah. Sorry. Do you want to go? Go ahead,
That's a
Nas,
tough
and then I'll go.
question.
No, okay.
That's actually a pretty good question.
There might be. That's the real answer, right? And I think we're okay with that, as long as we make sure that the top priority is our North American community. The 12 o'clock time zone, or time start, I should say, was optimized for the biggest English-speaking audience that's out there. Like we said, we do know that there is a big audience outside of the US for the LCS, and we think that's a good thing, right? Growing global fandom for our leagues, for these teams, for these pros is a great thing for the sport, but it can't come at the cost of losing our domestic audience. And so that's why we're going to do the shift. But in addition to that shift, we do want to look at ways to bring more fans in, even starting at these new times. So you can expect to see us launch, as an example, like a Spanish language feed later this season. We're looking at other interesting things like getting co-streamers in other regions to, bring LCS content there. So we're going to try a number of things this year to
What this translates to is they just believe that they're tapped out on the English audience. Like they don't think that they can get much more than what they not English, the North American audience. They don't think they can get much more than what they currently have. And the only reason that they shifted the time slot was simply because they were worried that, say there were 50,000 people that they thought would be malleable from NA that would go to the noon slot as well. They found out that 50,000 were not, that they would drop down to 30, and they're not willing to give up that 20K there just to gain 30 elsewhere whenever that could have potentially bad ripple effects elsewhere. But they still are not confident in any way about growing an audience in North America. Like, they're notice how all the words are saying that they're catering to NA and they're making sure that we know, but they're not focusing their growth efforts on us because
really could get the LCS back to those peak, viewership years that they saw in 2016 through 2019.
don't know if that's possible.
And at that time, about 45% of that viewership was coming from outside of NA. And so we just see this as like a huge opportunity area.
By the way, I don't know if you saw it, but we built a co-streamer pod in the arena. So we're going to lean even further into co-streamers. That may be a way that we reach other languages as well. But
I actually really like that.
One of the differences in esports and traditional sports that really took a while for me personally to kind of get my head around. I'm a huge traditional sports fan. Traditional sports are hyper local. Like, you're an LA Rams fan because you live in LA generally, I think. I'm a Boston Celtics fan. I don't live in Boston, but I watch the Boston broadcast, and it's at East Coast times, which aren't great for me, but I still watch every Boston game. With esports, fandom is much more international because the nature of online games and our audience being online and on streaming platforms. And so the fandom is spread out more. It's more of an international focus, I think, for each of our regional leagues that we want to strengthen going forward. So we do think about the audience for the LCS that's outside of North America.
I think very
because
similar
that's a
to
key
John
part of
in
our
this
player
regard.
base. That's a key part of the fandom for the product itself. So it is a consideration.
I am a big traditionalist.
But primarily,
in that
we
regard.
want to focus on serving the NA audience first.
Are there any plans to increase transparency around North American viewership as opposed to the rest of your that occurs whenever fans who can't really do much beyond like look at the number underneath the Twitch stream or the YouTube stream? Every now and then Esports Charts puts out like a report or whatever, and that sometimes creates like a Reddit thread. And when they see viewership slip, I think people tend to feel like LCS is dying, right? That narrative starts to spin up. But then, if you are personally, it sounds as though it would be good for you, even if viewership decreased a slight amount or even stayed the same at this new time, if there was a higher percentage of those folks that are North American. If this is for the North American League, the North American viewership is up. So I don't know if that's something you would ever be comfortable talking about more, because obviously, as opposed to traditional sports, there's just very little data that's ever public or transparent around this stuff.
Our audience does a pretty good job, actually, of tracking our viewership. I'm always surprised that I see numbers out there before I even get the numbers, and we have partners who help us with that. Here's what I'll commit to you, Travis. At a minimum, let's get together mid-split. We're going to be monitoring how things are going with the LCS across all these different changes that we're making with the show itself, with these new times. Let's do like a mid-split update, and we can share some of the learnings that we've seen over the first half of the split. We can talk about things like that if you like. But again, in a effort to be more transparent, be more communicative, I will totally commit to that because it's going to be a big focus of ours. We will not let the LCS die, and it is a huge.
I am perfectly fine with a mid-split update. I think it's actually really smart, especially with like global riot. Now, obviously, we need more communication than just what will likely be like beginning, middle, end, or like they won't do an end, but they'll do like a pre-summer, middle. 5 points of communication throughout the year isn't bad. But I think there still need to be like small updates around that. But I think that can be other people and not obviously John. Like John, I think that's an appropriate amount and actually a really good benchmark to allow us to have communication and open dialogue between the two. That's actually like a very big commitment that we have not had historically. And not just like a post either, like a full-on conversation. Like, let's talk. That is good. I like that.
Huge focus for us. That's why you're seeing so many changes. I really want to land that message. The reason why there's so many changes is because we love the LCS. We want it to be more successful. It's a great product.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk more mid-split. I think it is a good time to do a bit of an update or deep dive. But also, I'm curious, how long are you committed to this 2 o'clock start time, Thursdays and Fridays. I mean, for instance, if viewership looks really rough those first couple of weeks, is there a world where like week 3 you break the glass and make some sort of shift on the schedule, or how long can you commit to this?
I think we need to give our fans some time to get used to the new time. We're going to be trying different things with the show as well.
That's fair.
During the split.
Cut the rug
So
out too early.
in my
I
head,
think one split
I kind of
is
want to
okay.
give it a full split and
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that way, I think we've had enough time for fans to adjust. We've had enough time for us to adjust. We've had time to do the analysis. So in my head, we're going to try this first split. We'll make adjustments for summer if we need to.
I think we've talked about as much on all the LCS stuff as I had
That's
notes
fair.
on. Obviously, shifting to 2, I think addressed a lot of the frustrations that I had in our last interview. But I am curious about the format changes that you've made on the global front, because obviously those have been amidst the frustration around the LCS. There's been a lot of positive reception around the global format changes. So
For the first time, we want to talk about formats.
Yes,
And I'm
yeah.
going to let Nas do that. 'Cause
Yeah, I mean-
she did all the work with her team. So
Nas, I mean, what went into these changes? Because obviously people have been very critical of both MSI and Worlds for a while.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of questions, including from yourself, over the last couple years.
I think I can tell the story now. I think we're far enough away. But first day of Worlds, or first day of Worlds group stage, we're in New York City, and Travis makes it like very apparent that like he needs to talk to Nas, and like obviously all the crap was going down with the ticketing stuff, like the interviews not being in like really good spots at MSG. If you watch like the first few interviews, like you can see me and Yamato interviewing out in the hallway, like just that, like it was not ideal in any capacity, but obviously they were making do with what they had. But it just like just compounding issue after issue. Travis and Nas went up to like a separate booth that anybody could see. So like this is not me like leaking private information. Anybody could literally look up and see them, and some people did. And they had to have been talking for like 30-40 minutes. Like while games are going on, just talking. I know part of it was like about this stuff. So it's like I know people give Travis a lot of shit for being like the mouthpiece of Riot, quote unquote, because he's the one doing these interviews. And by all means, it does suck for external media outlets to never get these types of opportunities. That's on Riot, in my opinion, not on Travis. Travis is, the guy that gets the nod from Riot, and that is what it is. If I was in the same situation, I wouldn't pass it up either. So I'm not going to sit here and lambast. It's more on Riot for not giving external media sites more consistent conversations like this. But it's like that was one of those where like I know Travis was just laying out all the concerns and like having that open frank conversation that I think goes a long way. And that's stuff that you might not see, but it means a lot. So next time people try to go on like the Travis hate train, just know, regardless of your opinion of him, he has the community's best interest at heart. And that shows in smaller things that you might not always see.
Around global event formats. And so we started, looking at that really seriously as early as 2021. And that exercise continued through the 2022 season. We wanted to take a very deliberate, analytical approach to it. We didn't want to just quickly make a change for the sake of change, but we wanted to address the challenges that we had also identified on our side with the formats, as well as, like hear the fan feedback and really understand what fans were looking for across the world. And that feedback's different depending on what region you're looking at. And so it was a very collaborative effort here internally. It was our team here on global, but working with every one of our regions around the world to really beat up multiple versions of different formats. We looked at everything. And so I'm personally really happy with where we landed, with MSI being a full double elim. I cannot wait for Worlds because I think having a Swiss format instead of groups is going to be really, really exciting. Just that dynamic seeding, and it's just going to be so much more competitive, right? Having teams of the same record be able to be consistently matched up. So yeah, we're thrilled with where it is. Again, we're going to learn from it. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of learnings coming out of it, and we'll continue to adjust as we go. But it's going to be a very hype year for international events.
I am super excited. And Swiss is going to push us on communication. That is the one drawback to Swiss, is we are really going to have to be clear about who's playing who and when.
But no more dead games during groups.
I can't, oh, so good.
It's going to be great.
So a lot of people will be looking at MSI and they'll say, hey, this is a really exciting event, World's very exciting event, and they will wonder if they can purchase tickets to this in a reasonable way.
That's right.
So are these going to be available more than about 3 or 4 weeks before the start of the event?
Absolutely. You can expect MSI tickets, information about venue and schedule to come out in mid to late February. And then same thing for Worlds. We're going to give a really long runway so that fans can really make their plans. And we can't wait to see them in our venues.
Do you have a window? I know you were able to give a window for MSI. Any kind of window for Worlds?
Nothing that I can share yet, but like I said, we want to give many months of time for fans to be able to buy tickets and make their arrangements. So more to come on Worlds. I know we haven't announced the cities or the venues yet. Expect that coming pretty soon.
Very good.
We're close.
Cities.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I hope many folks like me are relieved to hear about the difference between 12 and 2. I think will make a lot of people happy, especially the East Coast fans. But anything that you want to say to any of the fans out there, especially those still a little distressed and worried about the state of LCS?
Yeah, no, listen, I love all the feedback that we see. I read Reddit, so it's the best way to reach us. So thank you for that. But the biggest thing is we love the LCS. We are committed to the LCS. We only want to make it better. And we can only make it better with your insights and your feedback. So please keep it coming. We like it.
Naz?
Yeah, no, I'd have to double down on that. I think I love this community because they just care so much. All of the concern comes from a place of care for the LCS. We love to see it. We care about the LCS too and about this sport. And so just a big thank you to the community. Keep the feedback coming, like John said, and expect more communication from us. We're going to do better with that. We don't like the way it went down at the end of this year. And so just expect some of those changes.
Again, thank you so much for joining me today. I guess we'll be talking mid-split.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you. We'll talk.
You're going to have John just secured his next show with you.
Yeah.
Hey, Travis, thank you so much for doing these things, man. We really love what you do and all the content that you produce for the community. So thanks. And, anything we can do to help you, just ask.
It's a real moment.
I am happy that you guys are always down for me to come at you and be very frustrated
100%.
about some new decision or whatever. So I do. But I mean, again, I'm just happy you guys are willing to do this because I think there is a lot of frustration around the communication stuff. And so I guess we'll see how the first half of the split goes, and then I can come back and be frustrated again if it's not going well.
Please.
Thank you guys both for the interview. For everyone else,
thank you everyone.
You can check out the rest of my coverage of all things leading up to LCS in just a couple of weeks right here on my YouTube channel.
Very good video. Very good video overall. Some nitpicks, some PR answers that I think are a little bit but overall, really, really good.
Hello, everyone. I am here at the LCS studio in the new stage setup, joined right now by Justin Restaino, who is the creative director of the LCS. And this is our first ever interview. I think your first ever interview for something like this, right?
Yes, I'm not normally in front of the camera like this. I'm a much more behind the scenes, make cool stuff type of guy.
Yes. So there's a little bit of context setting here. I know normally I'd be probably sitting down with Jackie right now. Unfortunately, she's out.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be chatting with you. And I'm also going to be doing an interview later on with Naz and John, who are kind of bigwigs up on the esports side. And obviously bigwig in the LCS, but I think they will get more of the angry community questions. For you, I'm really excited to talk a little bit about the LCS because I think there's been a lot of doom and gloom, but we haven't heard too much about the exciting things coming in 2023. So I'd love to dive in a little bit on some of that.
I get. Important context to note for this one would just be that this was clearly filmed prior to the Nas and John interview that just went out. So at this point in time, the assumption is still that it begins at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern.
So maybe first off, we can talk a little bit about what your kind of high-level goals are for this year.
Yeah, one of the big things that we are incredibly excited about next year is this new generation of pro players and how we can continue to build them up. Right. We just had our 10-year celebration last year, had a big climactic moment with Bjergsen and Doublelift bringing out the trophy in Chicago. And this year we are really focused on what that next generation looks like with our pro players.
Yeah, it has
We don't
to.
want to forget
That's
about the
thing that we
veterans.
struggle
Right? They're a
with the
huge part of our
most.
storylines. Doublelift is coming back. The storylines this year has everyone excited, and same with us. So one of the big things that we're excited about next year is also building up that next generation of pro players the same way we did 10 years ago.
I was going to ask, how much did it ruin your plans when you're like, this is the old guard and now the new guard, and then Peter's like, psych, I'm back for more.
Look, Doublelift is
Always
arguably the GOAT if we want to go back to last year's conversation.
Sure.
And him coming back to the league does nothing but good things. We are all excited to see him back and see if he still has it and can hang with the young ones now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, on stage yesterday, as we record this, was the Boomers versus Zoomers, and I think the Boomers lost. So perhaps,
But they took it to game 3.
Yes, that's true. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. All right. Well, okay. So you're looking to focus a lot on telling the stories of these new players, but from a kind of look and feel of the LCS, should we expect a tonal shift at all between last year and this year? It feels like, I mean, the stage has changed. I assume there's a lot of different things changing.
Yeah, so there's a variety of things. As we saw at the kickoff tournament yesterday, we unveiled our brand new set design that we are all incredibly excited about. We've been working for months to bring this to life and think that this feels a lot more bigger, a lot more big, a lot more grand, a lot more immersive. And one of the things that we haven't unveiled yet, which we plan on doing on January 26th, which is our kickoff day, is our new analyst area. There will be multiple different areas that we'll be able to shoot in, different vibes, different feels, and we're really excited about
if you're going for the
level
laid-back,
of production quality that we're going to be able to showcase.
Well, speaking,
if you're getting rid of the host, like, yes, like the analyst desk will still technically be there, but like if you're trying to change the tone of it, I'm really interested to see what they do, because the carpet thing last year was a massive success.
of the analyst desk,
Hence why
there
they're
was
doing
a
this
big
format
commotion
now.
about a
It
week ago
works.
when Dash announced that he would not be returning to host the analyst desk. I think a lot of people had a lot of confusion around what he described as like a non-constant host situation, what that meant. Some people perceived it as like budget cuts, what. So maybe you can provide a little bit of context on what the broadcast is going to look like now, if there isn't going to be a constant host.
Absolutely. I'll say this right now. Budget cuts have not affected what we're doing on the LCS creatively.
Which now we know there's
Look,
literally
one of
no
the
budget
big
cut at
things
all.
that we have heard about for years, our fans know, we've heard this feedback numerous times, is how the LCS has felt like we've been trying too hard to be like SportsCenter or ESPN.
If you look at something like College Game Day, which God bless Lee Corso for still being there, but nevertheless, like the embracement of Pat McAfee and like newer styles of media, like the Barstool party, like style elements, you can have newer age media on older networks. It's just that traditional like 90s style commentary that people think, or at least the LCS thought, like we wanted to do this. When in reality, like you look at other sports products, like inside the NBA with like Charles Barkley, Shaq, etc. Like they have revolutionized the way like the analyst desk works, and then Pat McAfee revolutionized the way that like content works and like hype piece works. Like these major networks can still give you great new things. It's just adapting with it. So I don't want everything to fall on, oh, everything ESPN is bad. No, some ESPN stuff's good. At least in my opinion. Ooh.
We wanted to get out of the loop of having that traditional broadcast model, right, where you have a host and some analysts sitting behind a desk, or in our case, more recently, more casual setting like this, but that loop still persists, right, where you have your host, your analyst talking about the upcoming game, you get into the game, game ends, go to commercial break, go.
Now 1:17 in the morning, and we're finally going to finish this.
It's hard, I think, for some people to imagine what it looks like if you're not going back to just people talking about the game.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any kind of example of like the type of content
Sure.
you're looking to put there.
We, for what it's worth, we definitely still need to continue to talk about the game that just occurred. If a banger just happened, we need to make sure that we're analyzing it in the traditional way that we can. But doing that 5 games in a row, 10 games in a week for 8 weeks plus playoffs, it gets a little bit monotonous, right? And that's where it starts to feel a bit cold and the same. One of the things that we're trying to do is, as we're talking about and setting up the next game or talking about analysis, how can we do that in a more unique and fun way that allows the talent that is kind of heading up that broadcast segment, whether it be Emily or Raz or Jat or Mark, how can they own and continue to build that segment around them in different fun ways, whether it be Raz doing a hot pepper challenge or a dunk tank outside. Those are the ways that we want to continue to innovate and make the show entertaining for our fans and viewers.
You mentioned the new analyst desk setup. There's been some conversation, especially with the schedule change around Val coming in here on the weekends in the future, around what is LCS's, what is Val's. So for that analyst desk, you said it's kind of a new setup.
Mm-hmm.
What is it going to be a desk? What is it, like an analyst stage? What should people refer to it as? How are you referring to it?
We've used the word analyst desk. I started at Riot in 2016, back when it was an actual physical desk.
Yeah.
That has just become shorthand for a lot of people, and I think for fans as well. What we saw last year of this more casual setting, we still refer to internally as analyst desk, but really it's just kind of an analyst room, an analyst area. We love what we were able to come up with last year and saw a lot of positive sentiment coming back from that, and we want to continue on
Just
that. We want to double down, triple down, and continue to iterate on how that comes about.
Carpet.
We have multiple different areas, so it'll be a similar setup. So we'll have a telestrator. We have a new I'll just spoil and leak.
Sure.
We have a new giant video wall that we'll be able to use. This thing is very large. It's similar to what you'd see on like an XR stage. We have another video wall that we'll be able to use, and the whole area will be able to transform and take on the different team colors, team brandings, and we're also developing right now a virtual set that I don't have a timeline. We're still like incredibly early in the process, but to develop another area for us to have more variety in our looks and storytelling.
So there's a lot
As
of
long as
people
it's
who
not
will
the
look at
dome.
this, as I mentioned with the Valorant stuff, and say, okay, is this desk just getting done because they want a cool new desk for Valorant? Is the stage that we're sitting on just being done because they now need a setup that also accommodates Valorant?
Sure.
And so was this all just done for Val?
No, we have had this LCS, not this one, but the previous LCS stage, I believe since 2018 we debuted it. It might have been earlier or later,
Yeah.
but I believe it was 2018, and it was time for a refresh. It was starting to feel a little bit stale. It had done its job. It served us well. But regardless of if a new sport was coming in here or not, there were large aspirations for us to be able to redo a stage. So this stage is very much LCS's to own. I think we're seeing a small little snippet of it here. But we're also a multi-sport league, right, that we're using the same space. So wanting to make sure that I was the main creative on this as well, with a much larger team helping out, and we were able to get input from the LCS team, making sure that we're able to provide all the needs that they have, the Valorant team, also just Riot in general on the different use cases that we'll be able to have for this space. The giant LEDs that we see here are going to be able to transform into whatever brand, whatever look that we want, and what you're seeing here isn't actually all that this set can do. So there are some more hidden
I
secrets
was
that are
wondering
in here.
because
Oh yeah. I asked
the-
you about this yesterday when
Yeah.
I ran
the
into you.
desk here
So
in
I'm,
the
I'm
back
interested to
seemed
see
like
what
really far
you
back.
guys are able to reveal.
Yeah. A good example is sleds, right? Valorant has a very different look in terms of the gaming areas.
You call them sleds.
We call
but
them sleds.
Like the desk setup
Exactly.
stuff on the stage. Yeah.
What we're seeing
Yeah.
here is what the
Okay, makes
LCS
sense.
version of that is. When we move to Valorant, it will be a completely different look.
How about the analyst desk? Is that all set up? Was that all created with Val in mind? Is that a shared asset?
Yes. So Valorant will focus on one area, but we'll be able to use all of it. Again, no one knows what it looks like
that
yet,
whole
so this is
analyst
all
desk
in
hard
area
theory.
to
should just be a
contextualize
content
it.
It's hard to
playhouse.
contextualize, but both sports will be able to use and be able to take over and brand those sets as their own.
Okay.
So it doesn't. No sport is going to feel like we're borrowing from another. Everyone is able to own and be able to brand and take over the set in their own look.
Yeah, I mean, how do you approach that? Because one of the things that one of the first things that you notice when you walk in, if you've been here previously for LCS, this is how I felt yesterday, is you used to have like the banners up with all the teams that had won. You used to see like the photos on the side of the arena with players lifting trophies and all that stuff. When that stuff goes away, I think a lot of people look at it and they say like, oh wow, like they stripped a lot of the LCS out of this. You know, how do you make sure that stuff doesn't feel bad or that it doesn't start to feel like a generic set?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was paying respect to our history within the LCS, right? The LCS has such a vast history celebrating past champions, past moments in esports. And one of the areas that we want to be able to do that, I mean, look, we have 18-foot tall LED walls that go 42 feet in depth. That is 72 feet wide, 1,000+ panels. We're going to be able to establish that history in a variety of new ways that are a bit more modern and fresh.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about sort of
That's fair.
the
And I like
production logistics, right? Like the analyst desk and this,
banners,
and what the analyst desk
think it
breaks
served
will
their
look like, or
purpose.
analyst segment
But you can
stuff
make it look better
as
indoors.
we're moving away from using the word desk. But how will the LCS, if at all, change the way it approaches storytelling? Because there's a lot of people that were getting excited about some of the changes you all were making in the summer. But I don't know if there's a plan to kind of continue that on. How, a lot of people really like Drive and those types of shows. I know at one point in time you guys experimented with having the shows that were running before the days. So what are kind of the plans to look at shoulder content, which is
Bring
what a
them
lot of people
back on
refer to
days
that
that we
as
don't
these days.
play.
I have been, you can ask everyone on my team, I have been bursting at the seams, excited about the content and wanting to let our fans know what we're doing. I'll give you the full rundown of what we have slated for Spring Split. Not everything, but from next week, we are releasing a features piece focused on off-season, focusing on the rookies that are up and coming, some of the returning players. What are the top storylines? This is a traditional features piece, such as like Eyes On or Drive. We're releasing one of those for next week as well to kick off what is the storylines as we head into the new season.
Okay.
After this interview, I am leaving immediately because we have a hero shoot for our hero film, much like the ones that we started to do last year that our fans really loved. That will be releasing on January 26th, the morning of our very first show day. We have a social campaign that is starting and kicking off very soon. We have one of the things I mentioned earlier was wanting to build up our pro players, the new generation of pro players. You'll see a reoccurring segment across broadcast every other week talking about we don't have a name for it yet, but we're just dubbing it internally as a player profiles, a more high-end way of kind of getting to know who those pros are. One of the big pieces of content that I'm actually super excited about is something that we're actually doing with Dash. So Dash is still very much part of the LCS family. He bleeds LCS, and we all know that. We all love him here. I had a conversation with him last Friday, talking about some of this content series that we're going to be able to come up with him. And him and I are both ecstatic about what we're doing, and we want to utilize him in a way that is amplifying what he's incredibly good at, which is bringing out the best of our pro players, their personalities, their backgrounds, putting them into uncomfortable situations, and seeing who they are behind the computer screen. So
I think I know where that's going.
we're really excited about that. We'll be doing a content series with him. He's going to be showing up in skits throughout the year, and he's also going to be coming back to host our finals, our spring finals, as well as our summer finals. So
Okay, cool.
he's staying around. He'll be here. And then one other thing, I imagine you might want to follow up, but one other thing that we're doing in terms of those broadcast segments that you're talking about, we've actually internally developed, again, a lot of internal nomenclature, but a broadcast strike team to develop what those segments are and help us from a timeline perspective. And that's actually being headed up by Julian Carr, or Pastry Time. As people
okay.
know. Yeah.
All right. We'll have to. I'll make sure that he knows that this, this news is
I
dropping.
talked to him yesterday. He knows.
Okay, cool. I'd heard rumors,
Okay, Pastry.
but I was not going to spoil his fun. So that's cool. So Pastry Time still involved in the LCS Dash, still involved in the LCS.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The intent and goal never was to move away from either of those two. Julian has such a mind for content and creative and what our fans love. Every single meeting he's in story meetings or content meetings, he's just spitting out really, really great ideas, and we want to be able to make those come to life. And I'm really excited to give him the keys to the castle on that.
Very good. I think it's going to be cool for fans to hear that they'll still be able to know that familiar faces are involved in the LCS, especially since we saw several people say goodbye.
And look, this isn't a for sure thing by any means, but even Freak, right? He's just across the street on the game dev team.
Yes.
Maybe we bring him as a guest to talk about a patch note, right? Those are all things that we've talked about internally. Nothing for sure. Nothing's scheduled, right? But these faces we know and love are still here and part of the family.
Yeah, it's really good to hear. Beyond that, is there anything else that you want fans to know about that they should be excited about coming? I know I've asked you to spoil a lot of things that you guys usually like to keep under wraps. I appreciate you doing that because I do feel
I want people to be excited. I'm so excited. I love the LCS. Our entire team loves the LCS, right? There's a lot of that narrative, and I want to be able to get out in front of everyone and say, hey, look, this is everything we're doing. We're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm excited to show everyone.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I know I was going to talk to and will be talking to Nas and John Needham in a short time, but bumping into you yesterday, I was really happy that I could grab you and sit down with you just because a lot of people want to hear some of the fun stuff that are coming up. So
happy to do it anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all.
I think there's one thing that you can assume with content going forward is that Riot, at least what I got from this, is that they understand and they care. You have the right people in charge of Pastry Time, with everybody on like the actual like Riot team outside of like the personalities themselves. I think content's fine. You just need buy-in from the players. Like that's gonna be everything here because clearly Riot is giving them the tools to succeed, giving them the supplemental content to make it work. It is just going to be on the players to truly open up and let their personality shine. If that happens, we are in good hands. But we'll see. Anyways, I wanted to watch these at 1 o'clock when they came out. I started watching them at 7. It is now 1:30 in the morning, so it is time for me to go to bed. It took way too long to get through all these, but nevertheless, catch you all later.